The adequacy of the tools and technologies was also a concern in our audit of maritime surveillance in Arctic waters. In this audit, we looked at whether federal organizations had the tools and maritime awareness which is needed to monitor traffic and also to respond to safety and security incidents in this region. The warming climate is increasing the accessibility of Canada's Arctic waters and generating new economic opportunities, for instance, in the mining, commercial fishing, and tourism industries. This increases foreign interest and competition in the region and also brings a higher likelihood of unauthorized access, safety incidents, illegal fishing, and marine pollution.
Of Arctic waters and concerns about Canada's aging equipment have been known for many years. Our audit showed that these concerns persist. The renewal of vessels, aircrafts, satellites, and infrastructure needed to monitor maritime traffic and respond to safety and security incidents has been delayed to the point where some equipment will likely need to be retired before it can be replaced. Example includes Transport Canada's and the Canadian Coast Guard's aging icebreakers and patrol aircraft that are nearing the end of their service lives. Although plans to replace these are underway, there is no contingency plan if the delivery of replacement vessels is further delayed. This could undermine Canada's presence in Arctic waters. Le gouvernement doit
The government urgently needs to address the long-standing issues noted in our audit to put equipment renewal on a sustainable path and protect Canada's interests in the Arctic, including an improved capability to respond to threats and incidents.
Valérie Gamache, Radio-Canada.
Hello. I would like your opinion on what's happening in the Arctic. In your report, you're mentioning that in 2011, the shortcomings were observed, but after 10 years, we're still saying we have until 2023 to come up with a strategy, and the strategy will be to adopt measures for the next 15 years. So when you look at this, I mean, do you have the impression that we are not prepared in the Arctic? We have a presence in the Arctic, and it started in 2011, as you mentioned. Federal entities that surveil the Arctic, they discovered the shortcomings and confirmed that these shortcomings are out there. And they started talking about ways of addressing these shortcomings, but little action has been taken. So at this point in time, there is need for immediate action to avoid very significant shortcomings in the upcoming decades. So delays in executing projects or initiatives, would it not explode the costs associated? Well, it's hard to say, but in general, of course, when a project is delayed or expanded, there are additional costs. In 2021, we had an audit on the national shipbuilding strategy. And during that audit, we realized that there was still some time to get back on track when it comes to replacing the vessels. But right now, what we're looking at is that in the Arctic waters, there have been additional delays, and there is almost no margin left right now. So it's really high time that something was done to address the shortcomings in the Arctic.
A couple of questions and then come back to the room. Raymond Filion, TVA.
Merci. Bonjour, Madame Hogan.
Thank you. Hello, Ms. Hogan. Just to follow up on this question on the Arctic, does Canada run the risk of not having a sufficient presence in the Arctic if this trend continues? It is one of our observations that if there isn't immediate action, that there will be very significant shortcomings in the surveillance and the capacity to respond to urgencies in the Arctic in the upcoming decades. That is why concrete steps must be taken, not just to analyze where there are shortcomings, but also to see What concrete actions can be taken to rectify these shortcomings? Thank you. On the cloud, utilization of cloud technologies, are Canadian intelligence agencies at risk? Well, our audit in terms of cybersecurity looked into whether the government had necessary controls in place to prevent, to detect and prevent incidents of cyber attacks. What we observed is that, yes, there are controls. But it is the follow-up, the monitoring, which is not done in a consistent manner. There we are in the initial phases of transitioning to the cloud, but over the long term, there's a lack of monitoring just to see if these measures are effective. So the government has to tighten things up to make sure that the controls are there, not just momentarily, but over the long term.
Moving back to Zoom, we have Bob Weber.
Hi, I would like to return to the Arctic report. Forgive me if you've been asked this in French already, but a couple of questions. First, the report mentions threats such as illegal fishing and maritime pollution. I'd like to get a sense of what your assessment is of how urgent these threats are. I mean, people have been talking about these things for a decade now, and they have yet to materialize in any significant way. How urgent are the threats that we need to address in the Arctic?
Well, with climate change, Arctic ice is melting, and it is definitely making the Arctic waters more navigable. We actually saw that traffic in the Arctic has tripled over the last 3 decades. That's a very sizable increase, and we only imagine that it will continue to go that way as it becomes more navigable. More traffic just means more possibilities and more risks for certain incidents, and also has a really large impact on the coastal Inuit communities that are there. The ability to be able to surveil the Arctic and monitor what's happening requires tools, whether it be vessels or aircrafts or satellites or infrastructure, and all of those are aging. That is something that is very well known to the entities in the Arctic. And what we've looked at in this audit was the timing and expected timing of the useful lives of the current equipment and the replacements. And as those delays continue, there will, in the next decade, a gap will materialize. And that's why action is needed to make sure that those tools are there to help support surveillance and response in the Arctic.
Can you give us some sense of the way forward here? Now, do we need more things like ships and planes, or would it be enough to have more electronic surveillance, satellites, or some sort of surveillance system under the water?
I guess my answer to that would be a combination of all of them. It takes all kinds of approaches to surveil the Arctic. Not every ship needs to log its presence. Not every vessel has emitting technology. You need the support of the coastal communities. So the more layers of monitoring and defense that you have, the more secure that the Arctic can be. So it is a matter of investing, but also a matter of better coordination for all the parties that are involved in surveilling and responding to incidents in the Arctic.
Good afternoon, everyone. As the Minister of Transport, the safety and security of Canada's Arctic waters is one of my top priorities. In fact, it's one of our government's top priorities. I'm pleased today to welcome the Auditor-General report on our government's effort related to the surveillance of Arctic waters. Our government agrees with the findings and recommendations in the report and will take steps to address them. We are committed to working with our partners to address long-standing gaps in Arctic maritime domain awareness. This includes the continuous tracking of vessels and the identification of non-emitting vessels, as well as improving information sharing between our partners to ensure our Arctic waters remain safe and secure. Canada's maritime domain awareness Canada's maritime domain awareness in the Arctic is critical to ensuring that our country can mitigate risks and respond to incidents that may impact our security. To support this commitment, we will continue to work closely with our partners to provide the necessary support needed to ensure our security in the region. I want to thank, once again, the Office of the Auditor General for their work in preparing this report, and I look forward to working with our partners for next steps. Thank you.
Some question on the Arctic, right? There's a lot of questions to be asked about that. Specifically, how are we going to monitor our northern waters when Raider Sod is down? We don't have any more vessels to patrols. How concerned are you that we are leaving that entire swath of our land wide open?
So first of all, it's not accurate to say that it's wide open and it's not being monitored. It is being monitored. The Auditor General highlighted areas of improvement. In fact, the Auditor General did say that there's been a lot of improvements that's taken place, but more needs to be done. And more is being done. And I can talk about some of the initiatives that are ongoing and will be happening. Next year, we're expecting the receipt of a new commercial drone that will help us survey the Arctic. The Department of Fisheries and Oceans has icebreakers on order that will be deployed. We at Transport Canada are building a hangar in Iqaluit to enable to expand the -7 NAS program. So a lot of work that has taken place, more work is ongoing. We're also currently reviewing regulations for the type of water safety and security that we need in the Arctic. So yeah, it is being surveyed, but more can be done and more is being done.
So are you concerned about the blind spots we have?
We're in a totally different world today than where we were before. And the safety of our Arctic water is a priority for us. And indeed, because we are in a different world, we need to identify new technologies, new methods to deploy to ensure that we have safe Arctic waters. And we're working on that. Thank you.